Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a whole stack of material and really boil it down, get you the key takeaways fast so you feel, properly informed.
Get you up to speed quickly.
Exactly. And today we're diving into this really interesting intersection between an essay called Maybe Set Fire to the Patriarchy While You're at It and the core philosophy of the Cult of Brighter Days, especially how it all relates to these calls we're hearing for a civic uprising.
Right. It feels very current.
It does. So our main text is that essay, but we're also looking at a David Brooks op-ed from the New York Times. What's happening in America isn't normal. That's where he actually calls for this big civic uprising.
Yeah, she lays out a pretty specific vision there.
And then there's a response to Brooks from the Park Rose Permaculture YouTube channel, which offers a really different take on what an uprising might look like.
A more grounded perspective, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe. So our mission here is to see how the Cult of Brighter Days' whole approach, this principled absurdity idea, helps us make sense of these different views on, how to respond to everything that's going on.
Okay, yeah. It's a rich mix of sources. You've got Brooks coming from, a more established centrist viewpoint, looking at what he sees as a breakdown.
A breakdown of civic norms, right?
Exactly. He argues that Trumpism, as he calls it, has really damaged the institutions holding society together. And his point is that the usual partisan fighting, it's just not enough anymore.
So he needs something bigger.
Right. He's calling for this comprehensive national civic uprising. He wants universities, law, businesses, nonprofits, the scientific community, basically all the major players.
So, the establishment needs to rise up to save the establishment?
Kind of, yeah. A coordinated pushback from, as he sees it, the pillars of society.
Okay. It's a very top-down vision, a big organized response.
Definitely. But then, like you said, you listen to Park Rose Permaculture.
And it's completely different.
Yeah, a totally different vibe. They're talking about revolution, but not this grand national strategy. It's much more about local community.
Things you can actually do where you live.
Right, like getting involved in your local school board race. Or, and this is the example they use, even just having a really well-maintained compost pile. It sounds small, but
it's about building resilience from the ground up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Brooks is thinking macro institutions. Park Rose Permaculture is thinking micro, tangible, local action. Building healthy communities block by block, almost.
Which actually leads us perfectly into the essay, Maybe Set Fire to the Patriarchy, because it feels like it offers maybe a third way.
It does position itself as a third option, yeah.
Yeah.
They call it the glitter bomb uprising.
Right. Which is not Brooks's national campaign.
Yeah.
And definitely more dramatic than composting, though I suspect they'd approve of the compost too.
Probably.
The essay really pushes this idea of principled absurdity, using sort of unexpected, maybe even playful tactics, but grounded in, strong ethics.
And focused on mutual aid, community building, the friendship revolution, as they call it.
Okay, so we've got these different pictures. Brooks's national institutional push, Park Rose's local grounding, and this glitter bomb uprising. Let's really dig into how the 5 tenets from the Cult of Brighter Days fit into this. How can they actually function as political strategies?
Yeah, that's the fascinating part, taking these philosophical guides and seeing their practical application. So tenet 1, be kind.
Okay.
The essay reframes this as revolutionary tenderness. The argument is that acts of genuine care, showing up to guard a drag show, feeding your neighbors, even calling out your racist uncle, these aren't just nice things. They're political because they directly undermine systems built on, division and cruelty.
So kindness becomes resistance,
a
radical act.
Exactly. In a world that often feels deliberately harsh, choosing kindness, active compassion is a way of pushing back.
Okay. Then tenet 2, if you can't be kind, be nice. How does that translate politically?
The essay calls it polite defiance. It's for those times when, genuine kindness just feels impossible, maybe unsafe even, but you still want to navigate it without causing more harm.
So strategic politeness.
Kind of. The essay mentions smiling through your teeth while, metaphorically flipping the table. It's maintaining that surface civility, but subtly resisting. Not going along with things.
A way to avoid escalating things, maybe, but still not being complicit.
Precisely. It's tactical. It recognizes that not every situation allows for or requires that full revolutionary tenderness.
Got it. Okay, tenet 3. If you can't be nice, be funny without punching down.
Ah, yes. Satire as the people's pepper spray. I like that description.
Me too. But the key part is without punching down.
Absolutely crucial. The humor has to be aimed up the power ladder, as the essay says,
Yeah.
at the systems, the structures, the powerful, not at people who are already marginalized or vulnerable.
So using humor to expose hypocrisy or absurdity in power.
Yeah, it can be disarming, make people think, maybe bypass some defenses that direct confrontation would just raise. Used ethically, it's a powerful tool.
Makes sense. Okay, number 4. If you can't be funny, shut up.
This one's about strategic silence. Recognizing when adding your voice isn't helpful.
Like avoiding those endless angry social media threads.
Exactly. The essay mentions avoiding barely coherent rage threads. It's about knowing when stepping back is actually the more constructive or less destructive thing to do, not adding noise, basically.
Self-awareness, then. Knowing when to disengage.
Yeah. Responsible engagement includes knowing when not to engage.
Right. And the last one, tenet 5. If you can't shut up, go away.
This is framed very much as self-care and boundary setting. It's about recognizing when you're just not in a good place.
Too angry, too overwhelmed.
Yeah. And needing to step away, the essay mentions silent retreats, yurts, whatever works, so you don't end up harming allies or just spreading negativity.
Taking care of yourself so you can actually stay in the fight long term.
Exactly. It's about sustainability. Burnout is real, and stepping away to recharge isn't weakness, it's strategy.
Okay, so these 5 tenets, applied this way, they kind of build towards the essay's big idea, the friendship revolution.
They do, because that revolution isn't about, storming the barricades in the traditional sense.
No guns and flags here.
Not really. It's about building these strong, resilient community networks, whisper networks, they mention, banned book clubs.
Like that one.
Trauma-trained de-escalation teams for tense situations, block parties just to build connection, and yes, the occasional glitter bomb to your representative.
That's sparkly disruption again.
It's about creating these pockets of mutual support and resistance, operating at a human scale, building alternative ways of being together that challenge the dominant systems.
Building community as resistance.
That's a good way to put it. Strong relationships become a buffer against authoritarian tendencies, maybe.
Now, something else the essay really digs into is centrism. And it's pretty sharp about it.
It doesn't hold back, no. It calls centrism a moral weather vane, the ideology of lukewarm latte drinkers. Pretty evocative language.
Yeah. The argument seems to be that centrism treats fundamental rights and dignity as, debate topics, always looking for a compromise, even when core principles are at stake.
Which is interesting when you put it next to the Cult of Brighter Days' own third way idea. Because that third way, as I understand it, isn't about finding some wishy-washy middle ground on every issue.
Right. It's about forging a distinct path based on its own values, like the 5 tenets, not necessarily halfway between left and right.
Exactly. So there's an alignment there in rejecting neutrality on core ethical issues. But it also raises questions, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, how does this third way, with its principled absurdity and glitter bombs, navigate that space? It's sharply critical of centrism, but is it positioning itself in a way that fully aligns with, say, more traditionally radical viewpoints? Or is it trying to carve out something genuinely different that might still face critique from multiple sides?
That's a really good point. It's trying to be distinct, value-driven, not just reacting against or compromising between other positions. It's a tricky line to walk.
It's a nuanced position, rejecting the center, but maybe not embracing all aspects of the furthest poles either.
Okay, so let's try to bring in our framework. Order, chaos, quantum uncertainty. Alistair Lemon, George Golden Apple, Pixel. How do they fit into this discussion of uprisings?
Well, Brooks' call for that comprehensive national civic uprising seems pretty clearly aligned with Alistair Lemon. Order.
Yeah, restoring structure, using established institutions very top-down, wanting control back.
Exactly. It's about reinforcing the foundations, making things predictable again, from the perspective of order.
Okay, and George Golden Apple, chaos. Where does George fit?
George would likely gravitate towards the glitter bomb uprising and the friendship revolution. That feels much more chaotic, in a potentially positive sense.
Embracing the unexpected, disruption, creativity.
Yeah, decentralized action, challenging norms playfully, introducing novelty. That's very George Golden Apple.
Makes sense. So what about Pixel? Quantum uncertainty.
Pixel might see the principled absurdity itself as the interesting part. It's not just order versus chaos.
Like outside that binary.
Maybe. It's using unconventional tactics, things that aren't easily categorized as just restoring order or just creating chaos. It's exploring strange loops, different possibilities, operating in that quantum space beyond the expected political actions.
Interesting. So kind of transcending the usual fight through weirdness, almost.
Perhaps, or at least using that uncertainty strategically.
Okay, so let's try and pull these threads together. We've seen these really different ideas about responding to challenging times.
We have Brooks with the big establishment-led civic uprising.
Then Park Rose permaculture, focusing way down on local resilience, community building, the tangible stuff.
And then this essay, channeling the cult of brighter days ideas into this glitter bomb uprising.
Right, centered on that friendship revolution, mutual aid, and using the five tenets, kindness, niceness, humor, silence, self-care as actual political tools, guided by principled absurdity.
It really lays out a spectrum, doesn't it? From the institutional macro level down to the hyper-local, and then this third way blending community with, well, creative disruption.
It does. It shows there isn't just one way to think about uprising or engagement.
Highlighting different scales, different tactics, all driven by that feeling that something needs to change.
So here's the thought I want to leave you mulling over. In a world that often feels, frankly, absurd, how can those small, maybe even seemingly whimsical acts of kindness, strategic humor, just building connections in your neighborhood, how can those be genuinely powerful forms of resistance?
Your personal glitter bomb, so to speak.
Exactly. What's your version of a friendship revolution? How can those everyday things guided by principle actually add up to create meaningful change?
That's a great question. It brings it right back to the individual and the community, doesn't it? Thinking about the power we actually have right where we are to maybe make the world a tiny bit better, or at least a bit more sparkly.